Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great honor that I have a few minutes to speak with you today, and since there are many experts here on the subject of Zionism in Israel, I have been asked to share some of my personal story with you. I was born in June 1967 in Montreal, Canada, in the Jewish General Hospital. The Six-Day War was about to start, and my mother always says that I came into the world with the radio blasting news from Israel, and the doctors were more interested in the headlines than in my mother's contractions. But I was her fourth child, and apparently she knew what to do. I was born to a Zionist family committed to the creation and success of the Jewish homeland. That means that I was educated in the importance and rightness that we as Jews are entitled to a national homeland, just like so many other people of the world, and that this was something that was worth fighting for, so that we, the Jewish people, can have a place that we call home, a place to be normal, a place where we will stop being visitors, dependent on the generosity and acceptance of another people in another land, and yet still be able to maintain our idealism and our values. It means that I was sent to Jewish day school, where we learned Hebrew and Jewish subjects, along with all of the relevant core curriculum of the modern day, and that our dinner conversation was peppered with talk about Israel, with awe and reverence, and that we listened to Israeli music on vinyl records on weekend afternoons, and that Shabbat dinner on Friday night was as much about being with the family as it was about lighting candles and talking about current events, or listening to my father tell us about snippets of his life when he was in Poland as a boy, or about how he survived the war, but only if he was in a particular mood. I grew up in a very comfortable community in Montreal. I had nothing to be afraid of, and I knew mostly Jewish families. So it doesn't really explain the fact that in the oddest times and in the most inopportune places, I can and have and probably always will suddenly imagine myself as a survivor running through a small town in Europe, trying to find a place to hide, or wondering who will help me. Where would I go? How would I manage? Would I be smart enough to find my way? Lucky enough? Would I be clever enough to get someone to help me? This bug in my brain exists so profoundly in my head that this summer, when I was on a self-drive river cruise in the Burgundy region of France, we docked our barge on an idyllic afternoon near a park in a town that has no Jews, and of course I know this because I Googled it. And so anyways, I knew our boat was parked a little bit far from the grass, but we let it be, and I jumped off the boat and I fell. My knee got caught, it swelled up instantly, and for a split second, I wondered if I'd be able to walk for the rest of the trip. And in the next split second, I wondered what would I do if the Nazis were coming and I needed to run. I wondered, how would I live if I broke my leg and the year was 1944? I mean, that would be it. I would be a goner. One false move, and I would have risked my life, and everyone that was with me would have been in danger. But you see, to walk around with this type of second-generation Holocaust survivor narrative constantly in the back of one's mind is not simple. So I try to use it as a gift. It pushes me to succeed. It pushes me to be vigilant. It pushes me to use all of my emotional intelligence in my personal and business life, because at any moment, I think, everything could get taken away. As a child, I always knew I would make Aliyah one day, mostly because in my mind, I thought Israeli women were an amazing combination of strong and vulnerable forces to be reckoned with, but also motherly and protective of their families. And when I moved to Israel in July 2000, and although there were many fears and doubts and concerns, it was also at the height of the peace process. So I was filled with hope that maybe we were at a turning point in the history of the Middle East and the history of our people. Anti-Semitism, of course, has never disappeared, but in the year 2000, it was not anywhere near the highs that you see in our society today, or at least incidences were down. But more importantly, in the year 2000, it was definitely not as socially acceptable to be overtly against Zionism as it is today. When I made Aliyah 22 years ago, the conversation in these large Jewish conferences wasn't about anti-Semitism. It was about how we as Jews can be a model to other nations, or about how we can and need to strengthen our Jewish identity, or how we will deal with the Russian immigration. But 2 months after my move in September 2000, any idyllic hopes of living at a time of historic peace came crashing down as we struggled in Israel when Arafat terminated the negotiations of peace and returned us to terrorism. But at the time, consistent with my beliefs in people-to-people coexistence, in 2000, I was living in Jaffa, a mixed town south of Tel Aviv where Israeli Jews and Israeli Arabs have been living side by side for years, watching each other's children grow up and sipping tea in each other's homes. All of a sudden, tires were being burned on the streets, and the neighborhood baker, who knew everyone's name and their favorite pastry, became, for a short while, a place to avoid. But the beautiful thing about living in Israel, which is really hard to explain, is that after difficult times like these, life goes back to normal. We go back to buying pastry at the bakery. We sit in cafes and we walk on the beaches. The vibrant life in Israel is one that you almost have to see to believe. It brims with color and music and teems with life, and we move on. Life simply goes back to normal. And I love being part of this culture of resilience with the odor and tenor of grit everywhere I go. I finally felt and feel like I am amongst my people. And it's not, by the way, like I like everyone I meet or that I'm entirely comfortable with the differences that my Canadian culturalisms encounter over, let's say, dinner table manners or driving habits on the roads. But overall, I think, wow, we have so much to be proud of in this country I call home. Over the last few years, as the boycott, divest, and sanction movement gained more and more momentum on campuses and in the media, I started to get very confused. First of all, I consider myself to be a Northeast progressive liberal. I slept on the porch of Swarthmore College asking the president to divest from South Africa in the 1980s. So as a North American Jew, I confessed over the years, and in spite of my second-generation anxieties, I believed that anti-Semitism was an issue that we had beaten and put to sleep. I thought, no, I was sure that it was a thing of the past, or that even if it still existed under the surface, I never believed that it would be allowed to surface again. I was sure that all of the ongoing survivor movie narrative in my head was just a matter between me and my psychologist and had no real grounding in reality today. But as an Israeli, I started to see, how could I not, that the complex issues of the territories and geographies in the very difficult neighborhood where we live, and the lack of acceptance of Israel as a Zionist state, or in other words, the lack of acceptance of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, was on the rise and was alive and kicking. I could see that the part of the world that was once very comfortable for me was seeing me, a Jew and an Israeli and a Zionist from a totally new and different and negative perspective. And this came as a shock to me. Now, this isn't the place to get into the competing geopolitical narratives, but what I'm trying to say here today is that I never expected that by living in Israel, my homeland, that over the years, I would be faced with a trend that would be putting me in the category of the bad guy. How did that happen? I'm not a bad guy, but I do want my children to be safe, and I do want my country to act in a way that will protect me. How did everything get turned on its head? How do you and me, good, thinking, Jewish people who want to support Israel and who also believe in basic human rights for all people, manage this messy situation when it is so very complex? Well, let me tell you a bit about my life in Israel and why I still think it's the greatest place on earth. Each morning, when I wake up and go to work, I wake up to a mission. I'm chair of the largest publicly traded real estate company in Israel, a company my father founded in the 1980s. After he survived the war by running through the former Soviet Union from Poland and by keeping one step ahead of the advancing Nazi forces, after he arrived in Palestine in 1942, after learning that most of his family had perished in the camps, and after serving in the IDF in the War of Independence, and after searching for remaining living family in South Africa, in England and America, he finally came to Canada with only $80 in his pocket. And there he became a successful businessman in real estate. In the 1980s, he invested his hard-earned savings and took out a loan and built the first enclosed air-conditioned shopping mall in Israel, a concept that had not yet arrived in the budding Middle Eastern economy. In keeping with the Zionist spirit, he also coined a new word for the Hebrew language by joining the word for shopping, kniot, with the word for parking, chanyon, and created the word kanyon, which is now the well-used word for modern shopping center in Hebrew. From this first investment, my father built other malls, and then he built the now well-known Azrieli Center in Tel Aviv, and ultimately a very successful company that went public in 2010. In 2014, 8 years ago, I took over as chair. Since then, I have expanded the company, where we now have a total of 19 shopping centers, 17 office buildings, 4 senior houses with 2 more under construction. We recently entered the data center industry, and I have over 1 million meters under development. But ask me if I do this only for the money. I don't. I do this to build Israel. I'm on a mission to create spaces in Israel where people can gather and shop and create communities with each other. And through this success, we are also privileged to be able to give back in so many ways through the Azrieli Foundations. This mission is bigger than me, and it's bigger than us, and it pulses through the veins of our organizations and the people who work for us. But I understand that to work and to live in Israel today is to live in a world filled with contradictions that somehow you have to balance in your mind. The country is vibrant, yes, but there are still so many areas that are underdeveloped. People are educated, but there is still a huge issue with the education system, and the lack of curriculum requirements for a large segment of the population is, in my opinion, the biggest issue facing Israel today. The subject of freedom of pluralistic religious expression within our own people, Reform, conservative, and other forms of Jewish religious expression, something that I know many of you from North America struggle with when it comes to Israel. But I can tell you that there are pockets of real pluralism happening all over the country, in Ra'anana, Tel Aviv, Beersheba, and Jerusalem, with so many people living rich, authentic Jewish and religious lives. There is an amazing, it's true, there is an amazing art and culture scene, which is rich in free speech, real free speech. And there are plenty of expressions for and against the government. We are much less politically correct for good and for bad, but we also don't cancel each other out for having different opinions. And while our representation system in the government is complex and may even require reform, it is a reflection of the voices given to all the citizens of Israel, Arab, Haredi, secular, and national religious, because this is actually what a democracy looks like. There are great writers, a happening music scene, all of which reflect the hope, the angst, the determination, and the despair that we face each day as we struggle on our journey of maturation from being a new country to being where we are today, an already grown-up country. Our right to self-determination is a fact. Israel exists. We aren't going anywhere. Zionism is a dream that came true. The question before us today is only how do we continue to grow from here? And I understand that not every Jew today is going to move to Israel, but I want you, friends from abroad and friends from Israel, to understand that the reason to move to Israel is so much more than just a safe haven for all of us. Israel is a vibrant country and a leader in so many fields and opportunities on every corner. Our people have a resilience and an entrepreneurial spirit and a willingness to think out of the box that brings value to any organization. And it's true, the language may not be your mother tongue, but it is learnable, and you can manage. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, by the way, because it is a challenge. But I work at it every day, and it can be overcome. What I like to say about Israel is that it is against the odds one of the happiest places on earth for people to live. And I'm sure you've heard about the UN-sponsored World Happiness Index between 2019 and 2022, which measures a person's sense of well-being. Well, Israel ranked the 9th happiest country on earth, ahead of Canada, Australia, America, France, and England. Only the Scandinavian countries came first. How can that be? Because it turns out that happiness is about striving. It's about purpose. It's about identity. It's about community. It's about family. It's about building and creating and sustaining our building and creating and sustaining our Zionist homeland. We have all of those things in droves. And when you live in Israel, you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. This sense of struggle, along with the sense of identity and purpose and belonging, is actually what makes us happy at the end of the day. Herzl wanted to create a state for the Jewish people, and his big vision wasn't just that it was a safe haven, but that we should have a place where we could be normal. Today, in so many ways, being normal, but still maintaining our idealism, has also become one of our biggest challenges. For centuries, as outsiders, we struggled to fit in, but the sense of being an outsider also kind of kept us together. We needed each other. Today, one of the challenges that we face is that we have forgotten what it's like to be the other, both in our own land and in the lands where we've assimilated. But other people haven't forgotten. And it's a challenge to remember that we still need each other, both inside Israel and outside of Israel, as partners, if we are to succeed on this journey of maintaining and sustaining our national Jewish homeland from within and from without. As partners on this journey, you can come live here if it suits you, or not. And if you choose not to live in Israel, come visit and come often. Send your kids. Teach them about our history and why it's important. Teach them basic Hebrew so that when they come and visit, they'll have an easier time. Our joint homeland is a shared space for Jews from all over the world, in all shapes and all forms. And I want to remind you that you don't need to agree with the Israeli government and Israeli policies in order to believe in our right to a Jewish homeland. You do need to be willing to live with this messy business of building our country and to take a long-term view of the situation and to stay the course over time. In the present, we are working in our generation to the best of our abilities, but each generation needs to pick up the ball where we'll leave off. My kids will be going to the army soon, and I hope will do a meaningful service for the country. Your kids might go to the army, or might go to college, or might come to Israel on a visit with Birthright or Masa. Each of our children can find a way to give back to our joint homeland, but that initial inspiration, it really comes from us, from the home. It comes from the parents. It comes from the community. So from wherever you live and from wherever you are on the political spectrum, Don't give up on your homeland, Israel. It may not be perfect, but it is yours. Thank you.